All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're basically putting on our detective hats and using the official SASB standards as our handbook. We're going to uncover the hidden vulnerabilities inside the massive global engineering and construction sector. We're diving into a world where the financial stakes are so astronomically high, the pressure to win can sometimes push companies into incredibly murky ethical waters. Think about the sheer magnitude of these operations for a second. We are talking about the very foundations of the global economy. This is the industry responsible for building our world. Power plants, towering dams, sprawling oil and gas pipelines, highways, and even the massive data centers that run our digital lives. When you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar projects of this scale, it inherently creates massive financial temptations. There was just an enormous amount of money sitting on the table for every single contract. So that brings us to the multi-billion-dollar question, literally, for taxpayers, governments, and investors alike. With contracts this massive, how do we ensure the bidding process is actually fair? Think about it. When your city announces a new stadium or a country commissions a new waste treatment plant, how do we know the company building it won that job fairly? Well, this question leads us straight into the dark corners of how these mega deals are won and lost behind closed doors. To figure that out, we turn to the official Sustainability Accounting Standard for the engineering and construction sector, which is now overseen by the IFRS Foundation. You can think of this framework as a strict rulebook. It meticulously outlines how companies have to report these exact vulnerabilities to investors. It completely forces these engineering giants to pull back the curtain and show us exactly how they're managing the intense ethical risks baked right into their business models. And that leads us right to our first major risk area, vulnerabilities to bribery and corruption. The SASB standards specifically call out business ethics as a critical disclosure topic here, simply because the structural nature of this industry makes it uniquely susceptible to bad actors. It's kind of like a perfect storm for ethical breaches, and we're about to see why. The crucial takeaway here is that when you mix highly complex local permitting with a massive pile of cash and intense competition, the risk for bribery absolutely skyrockets. Just picture it. These companies operate globally, and they often have to rely on a massive web of local agents and subcontractors to navigate complex, unfamiliar regulations. When you have a massive contract on the line and you're just waiting on a permit approval from a local official halfway across the world, the temptation to offer a bribe to grease the wheels, it becomes a severe structural risk that investors absolutely have to know about. But, hey, corruption isn't always an envelope of cash slid under a table to a government official. Actually, sometimes the real deception happens right inside the bidding room through highly calculated, anti-competitive practices. The standards actually require companies to report their involvement in these hidden schemes, which secretly limit competition and artificially inflate prices for the project owners without them ever knowing what hit them. Let's talk about one of the most deceptive tactics out there. It's called complementary bidding, or what the industry likes to call cover pricing. Picture this. A company submits an intentionally terrible, artificially sky-high bid for a project. Why on earth would they do that? Simply to create the false illusion of a fair competitive market. It makes the pre-selected winner look like they offered a perfectly reasonable price, when in reality, the whole thing was completely orchestrated from the start. Then there's something called bid pooling. This is where rival bidders secretly meet up in the shadows to just divide up the pie. They literally agree amongst themselves to take turns winning contracts, ensuring everyone gets a piece of the action. And ultimately, this happens at the massive expense of the project owner or the taxpayer. They end up paying rigged, inflated prices instead of the true market value. So just to break down the difference between these two distinct threats, they're both highly illegal, for sure, but they operate very differently. Bribery is an abuse of entrusted power. It's paying off an official to win business. Anti-competitive behavior, on the other hand, is about rival companies secretly colluding to rig the entire system through fraud, price fixing, and tactics like complementary bidding and bid pooling. And companies are mandated to disclose how they manage both of these toxic practices. Okay, so this brings up a huge question. How on earth do international watchdogs, standards boards, and investors actually measure and penalize this shady behavior, especially when you're trying to track risk for an engineering firm that might be building infrastructure in 50 different countries simultaneously? Well, this is where it gets really fascinating. Under the SASB standards, companies literally have to report their active projects and their backlog in the 20 lowest-ranked countries on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. By forcing companies to disclose their footprint in the world's most corruption-prone environments, investors get a clear heat map of where ethical breaches are most likely to happen. And by the way, when we say backlog, we're just talking about future expected revenue that hasn't hit the books yet. It's basically the lifeblood of a construction firm. What's really brilliant here is how the framework completely forces historical transparency. Companies are required to disclose the exact total dollar amount they've lost from legal proceedings tied to bribery or anti-competitive charges. And we aren't just talking about paying lawyers. This includes civil judgments, regulatory penalties, restitution, and criminal fines. It slaps a very specific dollar amount directly onto a company's past ethical failures. Now, you might be wondering, why should the everyday taxpayer or an investor care so deeply about this? Because the financial fallout of getting caught rigging a bid or bribing an official is absolutely catastrophic. We are not talking about a slap on the wrist here. We are talking about an existential threat to an engineering firm's entire business model. The reality is, a single, solitary corrupt bid can effectively blackball a massive engineering firm. If a company's reputation is wrecked, or worse, if they are legally barred from participating in future public bidding processes, their future revenue streams are completely vaporized. That massive backlog of future work we talked about? Gone. Poof. That is exactly why managing business ethics isn't just some moral high ground. It is a critical financial survival strategy in this sector. To survive, these massive firms have to build an absolutely ironclad internal culture. The guidelines demand detailed proof of management systems. Firms have to ask themselves the hard questions. Do we have robust whistleblower protections? Are there strict internal mechanisms for reporting suspicious activities? Ethical compliance can't just be an afterthought. It has to be treated as a critical structural shield for their bottom line. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time a multi-billion-dollar project is announced in your city, and you look up and see those massive cranes in the sky building a new hospital or a highway or a power plant, will you wonder how that winning bid was really decided? The stakes are massive, the risks are global, but thankfully, the demand for true transparency is growing every single day.